All right, everybody. Welcome back to Bubbles and Flames, episode number 16. And this is an exciting one for me because I actually have a couple people in the house today. And let's get going. All right, give me 1 second here. And down in the comments, let me cut this music off. Down in the comments, can you all hear me and see me today? Can you hear me and see me? All right. While I wait for a response on that, I appreciate everybody and all their patience with yesterday, but let's go ahead and jump right into it. Today's episode is about how to do product labeling and how to make your product stand out amongst the crowd. But before we start that, I have a few things that I wanted to go over. And for those of you all that are watching the replay, my name is Tina, and I am the host of Bubbles and Flames. And I also am the owner and the founder of a candle company called Nuts About Candles. And that is me. And I wanted to take the time to welcome everybody back. And also, we haven't done this in a while, but just to generally say welcome to Bubbles and Flames, the podcast. And this podcast is for candle and soap makers and anybody that wants to stop through and say, hey. And some of the topics are specific for makers in the industry, but of course, anyone in business is welcome. All right. And we do this every night, every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on YouTube. All right, so we'll hope you'll come back and hang out with us. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. All right, the announcements. Pretty much wanted to give some shout outs to some people. Again, thank you to Abba over at Akiba Wellness Studio for winning the giveaway. And also, congratulations to Rob from Dapper Guru for his feature in Midwest Candle Co. All right. Also, reviewing last week, we had a lot of fun last week. And does anybody remember what the topic is? If you don't, check out episode 15. And episode 15 is about making your products stand out, or how to make your products stand out. All right. So now what I'm going to do, one thing that is important about your products, labeling. It can be the vein of your existence, or it can be something that just makes you like a proud parent. Labeling is something that I struggle with. Most makers struggle with, because we have to have a lot of items in a little bit of space. So what I'm going to do is bring up one of my moderators, and I call my mods the mod squad. I'm going to bring up one of the squad members, and this is Rob from Dapper Guru. And what he's going to talk about is branding and also doing your labeling, and give us some tips, tricks, and suggestions on how to make our labeling stand out amongst the crowd. All right, give me just a second, and I'm going to bring Rob up. And I'm going to turn my camera off while he's talking. And Rob, welcome again back to Bubbles and Flame.
Thank you. I'm always happy to be back on the podcast and talking to you and talking to everyone else out there. So thank you for allowing me to be on, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Do you want me to just go in?
Can you hear me? Sorry, I had myself muted. And I
Yes.
was saying congrats.
Oh,
Now that you're up here on being featured in one of our favorite suppliers. And if
oh
you all
yes.
haven't heard of Midwest Candle Co. or
Thank you.
Midwest Fragrance Company, you might want to check them out.
Yeah,
They
they're
they are
amazing.
they are amazing. All right.
Yeah.
So what I'm gonna do, Rob, is let you take it away. And again, this conversation is about labeling.
Awesome. So So thank you all for being here again. I am Robert with the Dapper Guru. I have a men's grooming line, so we do everything from shaving, beard, body care, skincare, and I founded the company in 2016. And so I've always Since the beginning of creating Dapper Guru, I've always been very keen on branding and labeling. I'm kind of one of those ones that loves labels. So I love labels. I love sitting there tinkering with labels. I love how things look. I'm always kind of, I won't say obsessed, but especially with the products, I'm always looking at the products as a at, I'm always looking at products as a holistic, right? Not just the function and ingredients and how to make it, but also how do you, present how do you present the labels? So how do you present your brand? Um, what you want to convey with your labeling and your product. So I think for me, labeling, I think a lot of times, sometimes makers could look at labeling as just, oh, I just need something on the package because I just need this to say something, right? It's like sometimes it could be an afterthought. And I really believe that labeling is really kind of, it brings it all together, right? Because labeling isn't just like putting a sticker or label on there so the customer know what it is. Like that's definitely like basically what the point of a label is, right? That's one of the points. Um, and so the question I asked like is what is a label? And for me, a label presents accurate information to your customers. So on a label, you need accurate information, such as you need to know what the actual product is, um, the product name, what the product is, the the um, the kind of the dimensions of weight. If you're doing fluid ounces or anything of liquid kind of volume, and then the weight if you're measuring by weight or the products by weight. So you want to have that information on there. You also want to have warning labels. You want to have where it's manufactured. You want to have the directions and the ingredients, and these are all you know labeling is actually FDA. It's FDA regulated. So I'm really not going to go into kind of the regulations on how what needs to be on your labels, but definitely go and look up like the FDA regulations on labels. You can there's a lot of free content out there with for makers about what actually needs to go on labels and things like that. So that's one point is, present accurate information about your product, how to use your product to the customer. Um, Another point is it conveys the personality and feel of your brand. So, a label basically kind of encapsulates, your product, what your product is and how it's shown to your customers. So, whatever the feel or the personality in your for your brand, you kind of display that on the label because most of the time the vessels that we use are indistinguishable. Sometimes we're using the same, clear or maybe amber, or if you're doing candles, maybe tins and glass and different colors. But the unless you're doing something a specialty container, most containers, most packaging is pretty. If we take out the labels, it's pretty standard. It's pretty bland. As in, you know, you have a black or white or clear or amber packaging. It's kind of the same. So a label allows you to kind of take that kind of blank canvas, call it a blank canvas of that packaging, of that container, and kind of make it yours, right? Make it your brands, because you can have pretty much two items in the same container from different brands or different companies, and the labeling is what sets them apart. It kind of changes the whole feel of it. So that's one. It conveys the personality and the feel of your brand. And the next point goes kind of with the same point of the previous point is it brings your product alive, right? So you have this product in this container, you slap a label on it, and it becomes a full product. I'm sure everyone's listening, or most of us listening, you know, we have made something and then we put it in the container and it's kind of been like, It's just a product in a container or packaging. And once we slap the label on, then it becomes an actual product. So it really kind of brings everything together. Like I look at the label, like I said before, as it kind of brings all these things like your product, the packaging, the branding. It kind of brings all that together. So it brings your basically it brings your product alive. So it just basically makes your product what it is, right? That's unique to you and your brand. And the last point, which I think a lot, I won't say a lot of people, I would say that might get overlooked a lot of times is that labeling, one of the things it does is it attracts your customer to your product. A lot of us are, this might be different because a lot of us are on online or have online shops. So when someone comes to your website, they're only viewing, your product. But in a retail setting where there's different products where you're on a shelf, your kind of your label allows you to attract that customer, if like the personality of your brand or the wording or so the labeling labels attracts the customer to you, especially if you're out in person, doing in-person retail or brick and mortar, where there's different products on the different shelves, or you're doing a pop-up or things like that. The label is what kind of attracts the customer. So it attracts the customer, because that's what I think about label. When I look at a label, that's one of the biggest things I look for. It's like this label has to be appealing to people, right? People have to be attracted to your product. People don't want to buy something that's they're not attracted to. So the label allows you to kind of instantly hook that customer to be like, oh, this is interesting, right? You grab their attention, and then they can go up and if you're on the shelf, and they can be like, oh, this looks cool, and then they can go and they inspect your label more. They can read the label, they can read the ingredients, they can read what it is, they can open it up. If it's a tester, they can smell it. If a candle, they can smell it. Soap, they can smell it, or anything like that. So like the is really labels really attract the customer, and it's kind of the first thing the customer sees, especially if you're on a shelf or you're out there. That's all the customer sees is your label, because that's mainly what the product is, right? You have a vessel, you have a container, and then you have this label that kind of brings your product alive. So that's the first thing they see is the label. And then so that's what is a label. My next point is like, what makes a good label? One, and like I said, this is something that you know can be overlooked a lot of times. It's a legally compliant label, right? Especially if you're doing anything, if it's cosmetic, if it's bath and body, if it's candle, where people are using, are consuming it and using it. You want to have legally compliant labels. And that means that you want to make sure that everything that's required to be on the label is on the label. And like I said, there's FDA obviously regulations for this, and so you definitely want to go and look up what the actual regulations are. Because for soap, one of the interesting things is if you label your product soap, you don't need to actually have the ingredients on the label. You can call it soap. Most people put the ingredients on the label, and so that's one of the interesting point with soap. And so, but you should have ingredients on the label. Soap is one of those things where you can just label it soap, and there's other regulations for that. But that's just another example. So I would definitely say to go look up what the regulations are for the type of product that you're making. There's going to be different types. If it's soap, it's different than a cosmetic. Cosmetics, they're going to need different labeling requirements, and then candles, there's going to be different label requirements. So make sure you look up the proper labeling requirements and make sure you're in compliance with that. Um, I would say another one is you want to have a functional label depending on the use of the product. So, what I mean is that you want to make sure, and this comes to the material, you want to make sure your material of your label is compatible with the use of your product. So, if you are, for example, I make beard oils. So for me, I know that it's an oil. So that means that I can't have a paper, like I can't have a paper label. I can, but it wouldn't be practical because oil and paper doesn't mix. You're gonna get, it's gonna be oily, it's gonna be blotchy. So I need to, when I do my labels for my beard oils, I need to have a bop, the white bop. I think it's polyurethane. I think that's what it is, the material. So you want to have a bop, for my products, for my beard oil, I need to have something that's oil resistant because the customers are going to be using it. They're going to have, they're going to, it's beard oil, so they're going to be using it. They're going to have oily hands. They're going to touch it. So you want to make sure that, and I think this is mostly goes for kind of the cosmetic and soap makers, and even for the bar soap makers, probably not so because most of the time the packaging is thrown away. But if you're doing liquid soaps or anything like that, they're going to stay in the shower in a container, then you want to make sure that your labels are water resistant or waterproof. And if you're doing anything with oils, if you're doing body oils, beard oils, balms, that are anything that's oil based, you want to make sure that you have labels that are oil resistant because you don't want to have paper, especially obviously with water. You don't want paper with water because the labeling is going to come off and it's going to be degraded. And so the same thing with oils. You don't want a paper. As I said before, you don't want a paper label with oil products because then it's going to get oily. Maybe the ink might rub off. Maybe the label might come off. So you want to make sure that your label is functional to what the use of the product actually is. So this, like I said, this is mainly about materials. So you can look those up, and like I said, if you're doing anything that's water resistant or anything that you need water resistant or resistant, you're probably going to have to use like a bop, and most of the time it's like white bop. There's glossy and then there's matte. So that's so yeah, you want to make sure that your labels are actually the is actually functional, right? It's not just, oh, I just slapped something on so people know what it is. The label actually has to be functional. It has to make sense for the product. And if you are a candle maker, obviously, um, I I'm not sure because I have a label, so I have actual a a industrial label printer, and I don't think that a lot of labels like the adhesive, unless you're really heating it up, I think you can use basically anything with the candles. But don't, like I said, I'm not a candle maker, so don't take my word on that. But I think for candles, it's more versatile because candles aren't, they're not getting wet, they're not exposed to oils and things like that. So I think for candles, you're more flexible with the materials that you can use for your vessels. But definitely, if with cosmetics and soap products, you definitely want to be cognizant of the materials that you use and make sure they're the proper materials for the use of the product. Um, Another point, what makes a good product, I mean, a good label, is that you want customers to can clearly discern what the product is and how to use it, right? And this might be common sense, but a lot of times we have to realize that once the product leaves our hands, we have no control over what happens to it, right? The customer will use it however they're going to use it. And it's our responsibility as business owners to make sure that the customer knows how to use what the product is and that they know how to use it. So clearly discern. So when I say that, that means that it comes from 2 points. It comes from the point of if your product is on a retail shelf, you want your customer to know what your product is just by looking at the product, right? You don't want them to sit there and go, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is because customers can they're just they can become overwhelmed, or they don't want to sit there and just figure out your product. They're just going to go to the next product because there's other products out there. So the way to do this is I always, for me, my philosophy about label when I'm designing labels is you want you want to present information as clearly as possible. And that means have fonts that are easy to read, that are easy on the eyes to read, and that you highlight, and you can use by changing the different weights of fonts, so making fonts bigger, making fonts smaller. You by manipulating fonts and manipulating the layout, you can help that. So for me, what I do is on my packaging, whatever. So if I do a beard oil, so on top, so it will be my label. I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. So if you're looking at my label, how the format goes is it will be my logo on top, and then below my logo is actually the fragrance name, right? What I call the product name, right? So most of the times I name it by the fragrance. So it's a Havana Bay. So that's going to be in a smaller font. I mean, that's going to be in a font, but it's not going to be in a huge font because, to be honest, the fragrance really just denotes what it smells like. It really isn't that important to the function of what this actually is. And so below that, I have beard, and beard is in big block letters that are bold. So when you look at the product, you automatically know that the product is something for beard, right? It's a beard product. So and then below that, I have it in slightly. It's bigger than the fragrance, but smaller than it's bigger than the fragrance name, but smaller than the actual beard. Um, Wording is oil, so I have oil. So and then below that, I actually have like the weight, the volume and the weight of it. But how and I laid it out like that because I want the customer to know, for me to know what the actual product is. I do the same thing with my shave soap. That's my philosophy with all my products. I kind of bold, I kind of make the function of it like if it's a shave, right? What you're going to actually do. So it's shave, beard, body, things like that. So they know, like, oh, this is a product for this and that. And so when they're walking by, they're like, oh, this is something for the beard. If they're interested, they can go and investigate more. Or if it's for shaving, then they can investigate more. Then they can see, oh, this is the scent. Then they can smell it. And so that has really worked for me when, especially going out in pop-ups and things like that. So I say that so letting the customer, so making it easier for the customer to know what it is. That might mean if that you might not want to use different fonts that are not compatible with each other. You might not want to use colors that are not compatible. You might not want to use certain colors because they could be too distracting or can be hard for the customer to read. So you want to make sure, and you also, and it's a balance, right? You want to be clear, but you don't want your product, your labeling to be boring, so it's not interesting. But you also want to make it clear and concise enough so that the customer can know what it is in a split second and not sitting there figuring out what your product is. Because I'm sure we've been at stores before and we have seen that and we was like, yo, I'm just not going to buy it, right? So so you want to make sure that your labels are clear. That might mean you might want to change the background, the material, and things like that. And then the second part of it is how to use it. So a lot of times we assume because we make products and we are kind of in the weeds of it, it's common sense to us. But for a lot of customers, they might not know how something works. I have a shave soap, right? It's clear that it's obviously self-explanatory, safe shave soap. But customers come up to me and ask me how do they use it, right? Because most people are used to using a shave cream, right? So a hard shave puck, a lot of people haven't really been exposed to. So then I explained to them, it's a hard puck. You can use a brush or it's like a regular soap where you can use your hands, lather it up and use it. So, and you can, and so you can do that in person, but the best way to do it is just on your packaging. So that's where directions come in the form. So making sure you have clear, concise directions on how to use your products, right? So that's what makes another point that makes a good label, which is that the customer can clearly discern what it is, and then they can know how to use it. Another point what makes a good label that kind of is related to the previous point is it doesn't confuse the customer or repel them to buy. So if your labeling is so confusing and all over the place and the customer's like, I don't know what this is, they're not just not going to buy it. So like I said before, I err on the side of just making your labels as simple as you can as possible, especially when it comes to information. That means that using fonts that go well together, using fonts that are clearly legible that people can read. um not using you can but not having all of your fonts be cursive. Obviously that's common sense, but don't have all your labeling just cursive, right? Because that's hard for people to read, right? It kind of takes more brain power to discern what that is. So maybe have fonts that are kind of more common or more of a common style so that customers can read legibly and clearly and they know what it is. And another is to repel them to buy. Sometimes like it might be the color clashes, like I said, it might be the design. It just not might not be a great design label, and a lot of times that's going to repel buyers or your customers, because a lot of customers, and we all do this when we're buying stuff. It's a lot of about emotion, right? It's all these nuances. It's about emotion. It's not really logic. It's just sometimes we see stuff that is interest, right? Sometimes we look at something, it's like that's really interesting, and we might not even have a reason to buy it. There might not even be a logical reason to buy it. But what we do is that we rationalize why we bought it, because we could be like, this was an awesome packaging and I liked it, or this was an awesome smell. And then we might rationalize it by saying, oh, I needed more soap anyway, I needed this soap, I needed soap anyway. So a lot of times we buy based off of emotion. And so this is why a good label, a good design, legible label is so important, because you're really kind of getting these impulses or these emotions that people are just compelled to something, and you don't want to have your labels be not designed well or clashing or confusing to where people just don't want to buy it. So you want to make, and it goes into, you want to make an attractive label that draws people and that seduces people in a way. And then the last point for this is you want your labels to be in line with your branding and what you want to convey, right? So if you want to convey a clean, um, like you want to convey a clean brand image where it's just clean, you're using whites or blacks, or just, clean, like clean palette. You're not using any other colors. You just want something that's like a clean branding. Then you want to make sure that your labels are conveying that. If you want something that's more colorful, you want something that's more exciting, then you want to make sure your labels are conveying that. So you want to make sure that your labels are conveying what you want your branding to be. And that means it goes back to what I said. It's attracting the right type of customer you want, right? Because different designs, different customers want different things. So if you design your label, if you want this clean, if you're looking for this clean branding, like for me, I have more of a clean brand. All my branding is black and white. There's no coloring, it's just black and white. And so for me, that's kind of my branding. And so for my labeling, I wouldn't I wouldn't put anything that's like overly flashy. Like just for me, just for my brand, I wouldn't put anything that's overly flashy. I wouldn't put you know, different type of colors and just like really like the pinks and the fluorescence and just bold colors and just bold designs for my brand. That doesn't align with, you know, my brand. So you want to make sure that your label is actually in line with what you actually want to convey with your branding. And it's like these things are all it's a delicate balance, because you if you want a more exciting brand or more colorful and things like that, then you have to make sure that if you're going to add a lot of colors, right? What I always do a balance, right? Always when I'm designing labels or looking at for labels, you want to do a balance. So if you're going to do bold colors on your labels, and there may be different colors or bold designs, then I would make sure that my fonts are as simple as possible. I wouldn't want to do like bold colors and then do like a cursive or really hard script like font that's hard to read, because it's just too much going on. So I always like to for me to for it's all about balance. You want your labels to be balanced. So you don't want to go to the extreme either way. You always want to have balance. So that means that's playing around with your designs, that's playing around with fonts. It's all in layouts and things like that. It's like I'm not going into a lot of depth, because I can go into a lot of depth with a lot of stuff. This is just kind of a general overview of of labeling, and how labels are so important actually to your product and your brand. And so the next section is best practices for labels. One, you want to use, like we said before, you want to use fonts and layout to convey information. Um, that is definitely the weight of the fonts, um, how big the fonts are, how they stack up between each other, the spacing in between the fonts. So you want to make sure that your fonts and your layout is conveying the right information and what you want the customer to know. If you want the customer if you want the customer to be drawn in by the scent, right, then you're probably going to want to have that a more pronounced. So in your font's going to be bigger, it's probably maybe be bolder, it's going to stand out more. So you probably want that. If you want to convey that, the sense, if that's your branding and that's what you want to convey on your packaging, that's what you want to draw the customer into, then that's the information that you want to have that's, out there. So you might have that in bold, you might have that in the middle, right? You might have the scent in the middle bold, and then you might have, you might have the soap that's under it in a smaller font, or something like that. If you so that's another thing. So it depends on, like, for me, like I said earlier, my thing is on functionality. What actually does it do? Is it for shaving? If it's for a beard, if it's for a body, I kind of put that as the central or the most important element, and kind of make that the central point of my packaging and labeling. And so then they can investigate more once they realize what it is, or what is the function of it. Another one is using graphic elements to create personality and also draw the customer in. So you can use, like I said, for me, since I have a more of a clean brand, that would mean that I could put elements in there. That's not saying I can't put elements. I may put lines. What I do a lot is I just put lines in, right? I put lines in, in another way. So I put lines, I could put like a thin line or a thick line. So that's what I do. I also use layout in a way to do that. So I use, I lay out my um, um, fonts and things like that to make it more interesting. So I have, I might have, like I said, I have the bold in the middle, but then I have like a smaller font on top of that, and then a bigger, slightly bigger font, bigger than the top font under the, like, the beard. So sorry, being confusing, but you can play around with that, and you can also have like elements if you want, you know different graphic elements. I mean, you can have, characters and shapes and all those things to kind of draw the customer in. So using like graphic elements and create personality in your brand. And another best practices for labels is think about the use cases and where the product will fit in the customer's life. So, like I said before, if if you're making a candle, then the customer might use that as more of a decor piece. So you might want to have a label that maybe functions more of a where that's going to fit in their space. If it's going to be in their living room, then you might want to create a label that kind of, I mean, you can't know what the customer what the customer interior design is, but you can create a label that might fit in with anywhere else. You might do a cleaner label, you might do a more neutral label so that it can fit in the office, or it can fit in the bedroom, or it can fit in the living room, or the kitchen, the bathroom. So you might, if you're doing a candle, you might do that. Or if you're doing a candle, you might just do it bold, and that's another thing that the customer wants. And it's like, oh, this is bold. And then when the customer comes and purchase your candles, they might be thinking, oh, this candle is bold, it's designed, I love it, I love the colors, and then I'm going to use it for this space and that space. So you want to really think about the use cases. Like, if your product is going to stay in the bathroom, then you need to, like I said before, if you're going to have a bathroom-based product, then your label is obviously going to have to pick material that's functional for the use case. But you also might want to, your product might be just, if it's sitting in a medicine cabinet, you might want to do a more subdued, plain, label, because that's where it's going to sit at. You're not, unless you're using something as a decorative piece. But most of the time with like bath and body products, especially when it comes to soap, they're going to throw it away. And so a lot of times, if it's something with functional, I'm talking about men now. So like for my sector, for my industry or niche, men are just functional. So a lot of times it's like, okay, cool, it's a label on it, I know what it is. And so for me, that's why I did a more clean label too, because it's conveying information on what it is, and then it's just going to sit in the bathroom. But for candles, it's different because it's a more of a decor piece. It could be more of a decor piece. So there's so many, like, so I will always say, look when you're looking at product, and it's more about product too with the label. When you're doing a label, you're looking at a product, think about how it fits, where it's going to fit. And like I said, you can't always guess how people are going to use, or your customers are going to use your product and where it's going to go, but you can kind of steer them in that direction of, like I said, if you do a more neutral label where it's maybe more black and white, and it's and there's a little bit design labels in that, and that's something that's it could be anywhere. Or if your brand is about being out there, and it's something like a standout piece, then maybe the customer uses that as like a decorative piece where it's just like, oh, this is the central point, right? Instead of being maybe more of a neutral where it's like it's still in the living room, but it might kind of just blends in with everything else. So it's more of a complementary, design piece, instead of if you want something that's bold with this is going to sit, in the middle of a table or a stand where you walk in, it's like, oh, that's a really cool design. So it really, and that's what I said. Think about the use cases and where the product's going to fit in the customer's life to make, the label. Um, that's kind of, I think that's all that I really have. If there's any questions, or Tina, if you want to
You
chime
know, I
in.
have questions for you. I was just waiting for you to give your presentation, and you were not aware that I was being your Vanna White. So they have seen your products while you were talking.
Oh, okay. Oh, my bad. I was not look. I was looking.
No, you're good. So that just I didn't tell you on purpose because when you speak, I was holding up the particular product that you were talking
Oh
about.
yeah, that's what I said. It's gonna be so hard to not on camera. I was like, it's gonna be hard to explain my labels
No,
because.
they saw them. Yep, they
Okay.
could see. And what I was holding up for those that are watching the replay, when he referenced the soap. So this is called Smoky Nights Bath Soap, and this is what Rob is known for in the industry is his clean labeling. But this is what the bar of soap looks like. I kind of flashed it real quick, but that's what the soap looks like, and it smells amazing. It has a like a smoky um, smell to it, so it's really good. And hopefully you all can see this. Rob, this is what Zeus chewed, but luckily you could see the label. This is his beard oil. That is Havana.
Just shoot.
You know, he chewed it. See, he chewed the top.
Well, if he likes it,
He
you know,
did.
I'll take that as a compliment.
And your body soap works good on him too, by the way. Um,
It
uh,
does.
yeah. This is Havana body soap.
You use it on him?
I did. Not this bottle. This is my demo bottle, but I
Oh, awesome! I didn't know. Okay, that makes see. That's what I'm saying. When customers might,
did.
that's the one thing too. It's so funny because I had someone was like, "Oh, when I was making this beer bomb, they were like, I use it as a pomade." And I was like, "I never." It was like, "Okay, cool," but you saying use it as soap for your dog? I was like,
Yeah, he
"Never
likes the
know. You
scent, and
never."
I like it. Yep.
Yeah, you never know. Like, yeah, like I said, you never know how customers are going to use your product. Even if you put something on it, they use it in different ways, but it also gives you like, oh, you can use it for soap. So it's
Hmm.
like for a dog. So it's like, okay, cool, you know? So
Yeah,
yeah,
he got in the other bottle, so I just went on and gave him a bath, and I added a drop of Dawn to it, and it was fine. And before I ask you the questions that I had, the candle that I was holding up, which is gone by the way, this is Jayla's, and Jayla is one of our mods as well from Light the Mood. So when he was talking about the colorful labels, but you see,
yeah,
she still has the clear. You can see very clear
clear,
what it is,
exactly.
what it's titled, etc. So that was Jayla's candle
Yeah,
that I was holding
exactly.
up.
Yeah, that is exactly a good example of how you can use
Yeah, they got a full
design
demo.
elements and add personality to your
Yep.
brand and
And
still have a clear, concise of what it is, you know?
yeah,
I think a
these
lot of
are.
times people, you need balance. I always say it's either or. Either you're going to have a really distinctive script font, and then the background needs to be pretty
Hmm.
plain or non-distracting. And if you're going to have like a really colorful design background, you want at least you want something on there that's legible enough so that the customer knows what it actually is. Because I think a lot of times
Absolutely.
people don't realize that they need to. The customer needs to know what it is. Like a lot of times we, like I said in my presentation, a lot of times because we make product and it's second nature to us that a lot of customers don't know how to use these products, you know,
Absolutely. I
especially
was showing your back part too, and they can't really see this, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but your labeling is so clean. What he has on the back here, I don't know if you all can see it, but Rob is a vet. He didn't mention that, but he's a vet, so he has the American flag on here. He's also got where it was manufactured, his website, there are instructions on here and his logo. And then over on the other side, he lists the ingredients and the directions again. All right. And that's on the back on both sides of the
yeah.
beard oil. All right. Um, and that is also on the soap as well. He's got that information. So, I'm sorry, the body soap, because
Hmm.
on the box of soap, it's a little bit different
Yeah,
because
it's a
it
little,
just has the
yeah, it
directions.
just has the yeah. So
Yep.
when I do the soap, I just put the ingredients because because with soap, yeah, I just put the ingredients because soap is one of those things where it's pretty self-explanatory, like especially
You
bar
would
soap.
think. You
Yeah,
would
you
think.
would think, yeah. So, but
So, are you ready for my questions for you?
yes.
Couple questions. The first one is, do you have, and this, when I was doing my research, this actually was a good one because a lot of times, as makers, unless that is a focus of our brand, we don't necessarily think about those that have trouble seeing. For example, do you have any fonts or a style of font that you would recommend for those that need accessible items, such as those that might cater to or offer products for our seniors?
Um,
And you can think about that. I can circle back to you. If you
yeah,
think about it,
I
maybe
would
put it in the
say
chat.
any, to be honest, I would just research any common fonts
Mm-hmm.
and just use those. You probably wouldn't want to use anything that's like very like script or
Mm-hmm.
stylized. You want
Yep.
something that's probably pretty like clear cut and clear, and that's probably common for people. The problem, one of the issues when you're doing bath and you've seen that is that because of the labels are so small, there's only
Correct.
so much space and how big you can make words, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's always going to be, I mean, maybe a big thing you would do is like I do is just like if it's a beard product or soap or body stuff, you just highlight that, right? Highlight the function of it
Mm-hmm.
so that they know what it is. But a lot of times, if you're doing products that are small, like even candles and stuff like that, and with labels, it's always going to be difficult to kind of make it big enough because the labels just aren't big.
Absolutely. So, some suggestions piggybacking on what Rob said, especially um, really, it doesn't matter what type of product you make. That is an opportunity for you to put your product cards in there, or what we
Hmm.
call care cards with the instructions. And that's another bonus for you because you might not be able to read the label. So if you get those care cards, it's like, oh, okay. And that's another way to get your business information out there. One thing for those that do body or soap, as I have demonstrated here, for on Rob's product, is he has the wraparound label, and it's also waterproof, but he's got the directions as I just mentioned on both sides. So you can't see, because of the camera here on this label, he's got them over here, and then he's got the expanded directions here on the wraparound label. So that might be something that that you could do. For candle makers, of course, we have the whole candle, and a lot of people do wraparound labels for that reason as well. Um, so, Rob, while we are focusing and supporting you tonight, do you have any other products that you or services you want to talk about? I definitely wanted to um, get the information about accessible labels because a lot of people forget about that,
Yeah,
and their labels are all over the place. But
I
while we're
would.
supporting you, do you have anything, um, any products or services that you want to talk about?
Yes, I would always. So I forgot to like. I didn't forget, but I think when I talk about label materials, I, there are so many different types of labels and vendors and things like that.
What are some of your favorite suppliers
Well,
besides yourself?
Well, Avery, I use Avery because it's easy. You can just use a laser jet or inkjet. Get their. What I like about them is that they have their own software that you can use to format your labels, and
Hmm.
then you just pop it into the printer. It gives you you can download the PDF, so it's already formatted. It's already formatted to the actual label template or the label that you're putting in. So if you're doing 12 circles, you have a 12 circle template. It gives you, you can go in and it will and go into their program, and it
Hmm.
would and it will basically you put the you put your graphics or export your graphics onto the label, and then it will basically format it for all those. You just pop it into the printer. So I use those a lot because they're easier to, especially if you're doing anything that's like circular stuff for them. It's amazing, like the circular. So
So,
um
what's your favorite, square or circle? Are you
cir-
square or circle?
I like circles, but it depends on it really actually depends on what the container is.
Hmm.
Um, so I like Avery. So I would say Avery is probably what I go is probably my go-to. Because I do have a professional industrial printer. I get actually my blank labels from a basically a label manufacturer that does like blank that does the labeling that it fits the Epson that I have. So um
I got you.
and for that I do labels. So I do have a professional um label printer that I can do professional labels on. So
How
if you're
can we
looking
get in
for that,
touch with you?
you can you can you can contact me on Instagram at Dapper Guru. You can email me at robert@thedapperguru.com. Yeah, and so I can pretty much do any type of labeling, circle, square, rectangle. If you want something that's more professional, or you need something that's kind of different, because one of the things with, I would say, with like Avery, which is like the material wise, most of it's like paper, right? And so if you need something that's more durable, then you probably want to go something more professional. If you just want cost effectiveness, of doing labels, and you, or you just want somebody else to do it, then you know you can contact me. So that's definitely a service that I offer, and the price depends on the labels and stuff like that, because it has to go through the ink with the ink and everything like that. But yeah,
Perfect.
if you need help
Perfect.
designing your labels, pretty good at that. So I can help you design your labels, help you with what your labels should look like and things like that. Because a lot of times, people really don't know, don't know what my label should look like, how I should convey it. And so if you need help with that, I can definitely help you out as well.
Absolutely.
I'm a
And we
maker.
appreciate you for
Yeah,
that.
I'm a maker, so I know, like,
Yes, you do.
I know from the maker side of it, like, what works and things like that. So, yeah, I think a lot of times people, and I would say this not because I'm selling a service, but I would say this, that a lot of people like to skimp on labeling, but I
It's
really do
important.
think that labels are like one of the most important things, because it's the first thing that someone sees. It literally, people will literally judge your product based off the labeling. So,
Absolutely.
I think it's, if you can, I think it's a great thing sorry about the train, to invest in your labeling, because it does make a difference with your labeling. So I definitely would say that if you can, to really invest in your labeling, because it really does matter.
All right. And with that, I'm going to start my wrap up by saying, Rob, we really appreciate you coming from in the comments and stepping up and doing this episode for us. And again, we thank Rob from the Dapper Guru, and check him out. And also, there will be a short posted later so you can see what he was featured in. And he is known as Mr. Clean in the industry, pun intended, for soap and his labeling and his branding. All right. Oh, Jayla said this was great. And thank you. Jayla, thanks for letting me use your candle impromptu. Also, so what I wanted to say is, first of all, when you talk about labeling, you've got to keep in mind that that is your representation for your company. So those of you that are new candle or soap makers, or even you make body products, just keep that in mind. And also, I'm going to give you a couple other suppliers, and then we're going to start our wrap up, and we'll talk about what we're going to discuss next week, which is a piggyback topic to this one. So my suppliers, my favorite suppliers, along with Avery, but my number one is actually online labels. Like Avery, they also have a platform where you can design your labeling and you can share it. So that's another suggestion for you. And also, bringing in Avery and online labels, they are available on Amazon. So you can go over there and pick them up. But those are some of the ones that we use. And again, our topic next week is going to piggyback on this one, which is shipping and packaging. Now, we already talked about product packaging on a prior episode, but we're talking about shipping next week. So we will be back on Wednesday at 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. And our next topic for episode 17 is going to be shipping, packaging, and preparing for shipping to customers in the summer, and also getting ready for events, and just a general Q&A if we have enough time. And again, I want to thank Rob from the Dapper Guru, all my mods, and everybody watching the replay. You're most definitely appreciated. And please share this podcast. Again, we are Bubblez and Flames, both with a Z podcast, and available on YouTube. You can find us also on all social media. And Rob, again, we appreciate you, and we know you'll be back up again soon. And with that, I wanted to wrap up a little early here. We're right at an hour, so I wanted to wrap up. And again, we all appreciate you. And this is Tina, and I am the host of Bubbles and Flames. And if you have any comments, feel free to list them down below. So until next week, we'll talk soon, and everybody have a blessed week. Rob, thanks again. Signing off.